The alarm screamed across the mining facility as red lights flashed in every corridor. Zixthara's scales turned a bright green with excitement as she stuffed the last quantum crystal into her bag. Her long reptilian tail swept back and forth. As she moved, the crystals were worth more money than most beings would see in 10 lifetimes. "Move faster, you idiots," she hissed through her sharp teeth. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had been stealing from corporate mining operations for over 20 years. Vox smashed through a security door with his 4 massive arms. His gray hide was thick enough to stop most energy blasts, and his tusks gleamed in the emergency lighting. The Gorvani stood nearly 8 feet tall and weighed as much as a small transport vehicle. Security guards scattered when they saw him coming. "Boss, the human is slowing us down again," Vox growled, pointing one of his arms toward the back of the group. Reelin Torres ran as fast as she could, but her human legs could not match the longer strides of her alien companions. She had only been with this crew for 3 months, ever since she left Earth's colonial marine program. The 25-year-old woman had short brown hair and determined green eyes that never seemed to stop watching. Everything around her. "I told you bringing a human was a mistake," Pip squeaked from somewhere near Ryland's feet. The small Zilthian was only 3 feet tall, with blue fur covering his entire body and large round eyes that could see in the dark. His thin fingers were perfect for picking locks and disabling security systems. Humans are weak and slow. They can barely survive on their own planet, let alone help us. Ryland wanted to argue, but she needed to save her breath for running. She had proven herself useful during the planning phase of this job. Her knowledge of human-built security systems had gotten them inside the facility without triggering half the alarms they would have faced otherwise. But now that the job was done, the aliens went back to treating her like dead weight. "Shut up and run," Zixthara ordered as they reached their escape ship. The vessel was a modified cargo hauler that Pip had stolen from a Spaceport 2 systems. Away. It was not pretty, but it was fast and had enough cargo space for their stolen goods. The ship's engines roared to life as soon as they were aboard. Vox threw himself into the pilot's seat, while Zixthara sealed the cargo bay. Ryland strapped herself into a jump seat and tried to ignore the way her alien crewmates continued to mock her. "Did you see her trying to keep up?" Pip laughed, his voice high and sharp. "I thought humans were supposed to be good at running. On my planet, our younglings move faster than that. Maybe we should leave her on the next planet," Vox suggested as he pulled the ship away from the mining facility. "She will just slow us down on future jobs." Zixthara's scales shifted to a darker green as she considered this. "The human knows too much about our operation now. We cannot just dump her somewhere." Raylan felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard stories about what happened to crew members who became inconvenient to people like Zixthara. But before anyone could say anything else, the ship shook violently. "What was that?" Zixthara demanded. Vox's 4 hands flew across the control panel. "Security ships, 3 of them coming in fast. They must have been waiting in the asteroid field." The ship shook again as energy blasts struck their hull. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the lights flickered. Ryland could smell burning electronics and something that might have been coolant leaking from the engine compartment. "Return fire," Zixthara shouted. "I am trying." Vox roared back, "But they hit our weapon systems with that first shot. We have nothing to fight with." Another blast rocked the ship, and this time Ryland heard the distinct sound of hull plating being torn away. She had heard that same sound during her military training when they showed recruits what happened to ships that took heavy damage in combat. "We need to jump to hyperspace," Pip said, his voice much higher than usual. "Right now. The hyperdrive is not ready," Vox replied. "It needs 2 more minutes to charge. We do not have 2 minutes." Zixthara's scales were now flashing between green and deep red, showing her panic and anger. The ship lurched sideways as another energy blast found its target. This time, warning lights began flashing all across the control panel. Rylan could hear the high-pitched whine of systems failing throughout the ship. "Hyperdrive is at 60%, Vok announced. "If we jump now, we might survive, but we will not be able to control where we end up." "Do it," Zixthara ordered. Vok slammed his primary hand down on the hyperdrive activation control. The universe seemed to twist around them as stars stretched into lines of light, but something was wrong. The ship was shaking much more than it should during a hyperspace jump, and the engine noise was getting louder instead of settling into the normal hyperspace hum. "The hyperdrive is damaged," Vok said, his voice surprisingly calm for someone announcing their potential death. "It will not hold together much longer." "How long do we have?" Zixthara asked. "Maybe 10 minutes before it tears the ship apart." Pip was already pulling up star charts on his small portable computer. "There is a planet in this system, Kepler 442c. It has breathable atmosphere and gravity close to galactic standard." "What kind of planet?" Rylan asked. It was the first time she had spoken since they left the mining facility. "Mining surveys say it is mostly forest. No intelligent life detected, but plenty of wildlife. The corporations decided it was not worth developing because the forest is too thick for easy resource extraction." Zixthara's scales shifted to a thoughtful yellow color. "We can hide there while we repair the ship. The corporations will not look for us on a planet they consider worthless." The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a sound like metal being torn in half. Half the control panels went dark, and Rylan could see flames flickering in the engine compartment through the open doorway. "I am taking us down," Vok announced. "Hold on to something." The planet below them was covered in dense green forest that stretched from horizon to horizon. 2 moons hung in the purple sky, both larger than Earth's moon. As they descended through the atmosphere, Raylan could see that the trees were enormous, some of them reaching hundreds of feet into the sky. The landing was more like a controlled crash. The ship bounced twice before sliding through a grove of smaller trees, and finally coming to rest in a small clearing. Smoke poured from the engine compartment, and several hull panels had been torn completely away. "Everyone alive?" Zixthara asked as she unbuckled herself from her seat. "Alive, but barely," Pip replied, rubbing a bump on his blue-furred head. Vok was already examining the damage to his ship. "It will take at least 3 days to repair the hyperdrive. Maybe longer, if we cannot find replacement parts." Rylan looked out through the cracked viewport at the alien forest surrounding them. The trees were unlike anything she had seen on Earth. Their bark was deep red, almost like dried blood, and their leaves seemed to glow with a faint blue light. She could hear strange sounds coming from the forest, calls and cries from animals she could not identify. "This place gives me the creeps," Pip muttered as he gathered his equipment. "It is just a forest," Zixthara said dismissively. "We are the most dangerous things on this planet now. What could possibly threaten criminals like us?" Rylan continued to stare out at the forest. Something about this place felt wrong to her, but she could not explain what it was. Her military training had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now those instincts were telling her that they were not alone in this forest. The 2 moons of Kepler 442c cast strange shadows through the red-barked trees as darkness fell over their crash site. The blue glow from the leaves grew brighter in the night, creating an eerie light that made everything look like it was underwater. Rylan sat on a piece of broken hull plating, watching the forest while her alien crewmates set up their temporary camp. "Stop being so paranoid, human," Zixthara said as she arranged her sleeping gear near the damaged ship. Her scales had turned a comfortable orange color now that she felt safe. We are the apex predators here. Nothing on this primitive planet could threaten us. Vok laughed, a deep rumbling sound that came from somewhere in his massive chest. The human thinks every shadow hides a monster. Typical prey animal behavior. He flexed all 4 of his arms, showing off muscles that could crush most creatures on a dozen different worlds. I have killed things twice my size with these hands. What could this forest possibly have that would worry me? Pip was busy setting up a small portable scanner that would alert them to any large movements near their camp. But he was doing it carelessly, more interested in showing off his technology than actually providing security. My people have been exploring dangerous worlds for centuries, he squeaked. We know how to handle wildlife. Humans only left their own planet a few decades ago. They do not understand how these things work. Rylan wanted to argue with them, but she had learned that the aliens rarely listened to anything she said. Instead, she focused on the sounds coming from the forest around them. When she first heard them an hour ago, there had been a constant background noise of chirping, calling, and rustling. It was the sound of a healthy ecosystem full of active animals. The forest was completely silent. Something is wrong, she said quietly, more to herself than to the others. What now, human? Zixthara asked with irritation. Her scales shifted toward red, showing her annoyance. Are you afraid of the dark? Maybe you should have stayed on your safe little planet instead of trying to be a real criminal. The animals have gone quiet, Rylan explained, standing up and walking to the edge of their small clearing. An hour ago, this forest was full of noise. Now I cannot hear anything. That usually means there is a large predator nearby. Or it means the animals are sleeping, Vok said dismissively. Not every planet follows the same patterns as your Earth, human. Maybe nighttime is when the creatures here rest. Rylan shook her head. I have been on 17 different worlds during my military service. Nocturnal animals do not all go quiet. At the same time, unless something scares them. Something big. Pip looked up from his scanner with amusement. My equipment would detect any large life forms within 1 kilometer of our position. The biggest thing it has found is about the size of a small transport animal. Nothing that could threaten any of us. Maybe your scanner cannot detect everything, Rylan suggested. Impossible, Pip replied, his large eyes blinking rapidly with offense. This is Zilthian technology. We have been building sensors since before your species discovered fire. If there was a dangerous predator nearby, my equipment would know about it. Zixthara settled down onto her sleeping gear and closed her eyes. The human is jumping at shadows again. Like I said before, typical prey animal behavior. Her ancestors spent millions of years hiding from real predators, so now she sees danger everywhere. At least post guards. Rylan tried one more time. We should have someone awake and watching at all times. Guards? Vok laughed again. What for? I could fight off anything this planet might send at us with one arm tied behind my back. And I have 3 extra arms, so that gives me plenty of backup. Rylan walked around the perimeter of their camp, looking for signs of animal activity. The ground was soft and damp, perfect for showing tracks. She found plenty of small footprints from creatures that looked like they might be similar to Earth. Rabbits or squirrels. There were also some larger tracks that belonged to something about the size of a deer. But then she found something that made her blood run cold. At the edge of the clearing, pressed deep into the soft earth, was a footprint, unlike anything she had ever seen. It was roughly circular, about the size of a dinner plate, with 5 deep gouges where claws had dug into the ground. Whatever made this track had to weigh at least as much as Vok, maybe more, and the claws were longer than her fingers. Zixthara. She called out, trying to keep her voice calm. You need to see this. What now? The reptilian leader hissed without opening her eyes. There is a track here, Something big made it. Really big. Probably from some harmless plant eater, Pip said, not bothering to look up from the portable computer he was using to play games. Large herbivores are common on forest worlds like this. They are usually more afraid of us than we are of them. Rylan knelt down next to the track and studied it more carefully. The depth of the impression told her that whatever made it was not only heavy, but moving fast when it passed through here. The spacing between this track and the next one she could find suggested something with a very long stride. Most importantly, the claw marks were at the front of the print, which meant this creature walked on its toes like a cat or a dog, not flat-footed like a herbivore. This was definitely a predator track. She spent the next hour walking around there. Camp in wider and wider circles, looking for more signs. What she found made her increasingly worried. There were more tracks, but they seemed to circle their crash site at a distance of about 200 meters. Whatever made them had found their camp and was studying it, staying far enough away to avoid detection by Pip's scanner. When she tried to explain this to the others, they laughed at her again. "A human thinks we are being hunted," Zixthara said to Vok, her scales shifting to an amused yellow color. "She probably thinks the trees are going to attack us next." "Maybe she should sleep inside the ship," Vok suggested. "That way the scary forest animals cannot get her." "I am not scared," Rylan said firmly. "I am being careful. There is a difference." "Is there?" Pip asked mockingly. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you are afraid of your own shadow. This is why humans will never be real criminals. You do not have the courage for this kind of work." Rylan gave up trying to convince them and instead focused on preparing herself for what might come. She quietly gathered pieces of metal from the damaged ship that could serve as weapons if needed. She also collected some of the fallen branches from the strange red trees and sharpened them into stakes using her military knife. "What are you doing now?" Zixthara asked, watching Rylan work on her improvised weapons. "Getting ready," Rylan replied simply. "Ready for what? A tea party with the local wildlife?" "Ready for whatever is out there watching us." Vok snorted with amusement. "Nothing is watching us, human. You are imagining things because you are scared and tired. Get some sleep, and you will feel better in the morning." But Rylan had no intention of sleeping. She positioned herself where she could see the entire perimeter of their camp and settled in for a long night of guard duty. The others thought she was being paranoid, but her military training had taught her that paranoid soldiers were the ones who lived long enough to retire. As the night deepened, the bioluminescent leaves grew brighter, casting their blue glow across the forest floor. The silence was so complete that Rylan could hear her own heartbeat. Even the wind seemed to have stopped blowing through the trees. Then, just after the larger moon reached its highest point in the sky, she saw something that confirmed her worst fears. Two glowing eyes reflected the moonlight from the darkness. Between the trees, they were positioned about 8 feet off the ground and spaced far enough apart to belong to something with a very large head. The eyes watched their camp for several minutes before disappearing back into the forest. Whatever was out there was definitely intelligent. It was studying them, learning their habits, and waiting for the right moment to make its move. Rylan gripped her improvised spear tighter and tried to stay alert. It was going to be a very long night. The first pale light of dawn crept through the red-barked trees as Rylan finally allowed herself to relax her guard. She had stayed awake all night, watching the forest for any sign of the creature with the glowing eyes. Several times, she thought, she saw movement in the shadows, but nothing had approached their camp directly. Her alien crew mates were just beginning to wake up, stretching and complaining about sleeping on the hard ground. Zixthara's scales were a dull brown color that meant she was tired and irritated. Vok groaned as he lifted his massive body off the makeshift bed he had created from salvaged ship cushions. Did the scary forest monsters attack you during the night, human? Pip asked mockingly as he emerged from the small shelter he had built using an emergency tarp. His blue fur was messy and sticking up in all directions. No, Rylan replied simply. She did not see any point in telling them about the eyes she had seen. They would just laugh at her again. See? I told you there was nothing to worry about, Zixthara said as she began sorting through their salvage supplies. This planet is perfectly safe. The only dangerous thing here is your imagination. Vok was already working on the damaged ship, using his 4 arms to move heavy pieces of equipment that would have required a small crane on most worlds. I need to get into the engine compartment to assess the damage properly, he announced. Pip, I need you to check the hyperdrive motivator, and the human can, I do not know, maybe gather some firewood or something useful. Rylan was about to respond when Pip let out a sharp cry of alarm. He was standing near the area where they had stored their food supplies the night before. The metal containers that had held their rations were scattered across the ground, and most of them had been torn open. Something got into our food, Pip said, his voice much higher than usual. Look at these claw marks in the metal. The others gathered around to examine the damage. Deep gouges had been carved into the sides of the storage containers, and the metal was peeled back like it was made of soft plastic instead of reinforced steel. Whatever had done this possessed incredible strength and very sharp claws. This is impossible, Zixthara said, her scales shifting to a confused gray color. My scanner would have detected anything large enough to do this kind of damage. Maybe your scanner is not as good as you think it is, Rylan said quietly. Pip's large eyes blinked rapidly as he examined his equipment. The scanner is working perfectly. It shows no large life forms within detection range. Whatever did this must have happened while the creature was moving too fast for the sensors to get a clear reading. Or the creature is smart enough to avoid your scanner, Rylan suggested. Impossible, Vok declared. Animals are not that intelligent. This was probably just some scavenger that got lucky and found our supplies when we were not watching. Rylan knelt down beside the damaged containers and studied the claw marks more carefully. They were clean and precise, not the random scratches that a desperate scavenger would make. More importantly, only certain types of food had been taken. The creature had ignored the alien rations that Zixthara preferred, but had taken all of the protein bars and dried meat that were closer to what a human would eat. It was testing our food, she said, seeing what we eat and how much we have. You are reading too much into simple animal behavior, Zixthara replied dismissively. Wild creatures are opportunistic. They take whatever they can get. Then why? Did it leave most of the food behind? Rylan asked. If it was just a hungry scavenger, it would have taken everything it could carry. Before anyone could answer, they heard a sound that made them all freeze. It was a call that echoed through the forest, starting low and deep before rising to a high, haunting cry that seemed to come from multiple directions at once. The sound was unlike anything any of them had heard before, but it was clearly made by something very large and very much alive. What was that? Pip whispered, his fur standing on end. Probably just some harmless plant-eater, Vok said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Large herbivores often make loud calls to communicate with their herds. The call came again, closer this time, and was answered by similar calls from different parts of the forest. Whatever was making the sound, there was more than one of them, and they were coordinating with each other. We should get back to work on the ship, Zixthara said firmly. The sooner we repair it, the sooner we can leave this place. They spent the next several hours working on the damaged vessel. Vok discovered that the hyperdrive would need a complete overhaul, which meant at least 3 more days of work. Pip found that several critical computer systems had been fried during there. crash landing and would need to be rebuilt from scratch. Even Rylan helped where she could, using her knowledge of human engineering to suggest solutions that the aliens had not considered. But as the day wore on, she could not shake the feeling that they were being watched. Several times she caught glimpses of movement in the forest, always at the edge of her vision. When she turned to look directly, there was nothing there but trees and shadows. The feeling grew stronger as afternoon faded toward evening. The forest around their camp seemed to be getting quieter again, just like it had the night before. But this time, the silence was different. It felt expectant, like the whole forest was holding its breath and waiting for something to happen. "I think we should move our camp," Rylan said during a break in their work. "Move it where?" Zixthara asked impatiently. "We need to stay close to the ship to work on it. Somewhere with better defensive positions. This clearing is too open. If something attacks us, we have nowhere to take cover." "Nothing is going to attack us," Vok insisted. "You are being paranoid again." "Then explain the food containers," Rylan challenged. "Explain the calls we heard this morning. Explain why all the normal forest sounds stop whenever something big is moving around out there." "I can explain it," Pip said smugly. "You are a nervous human who sees threats everywhere because your species evolved as prey animals. Your brain is programmed to be afraid of everything, so you interpret normal forest activity as signs of danger." Rylan was about to argue when the forest around them suddenly erupted in sound. Multiple creatures were calling to each other from different directions, their voices creating a complex pattern of communication that was clearly organized and intentional. The calls were getting closer, and they were coming from creatures that sounded much larger than anything they had encountered. "So far, okay," Zixthara admitted, her scales turning a nervous yellow color. "That does not sound like normal animal behavior." "Maybe we should post guards tonight," Vok suggested, finally showing some concern. "Maybe we should do more than that," Rylan said. She had been quietly working on defensive preparations all day, using salvaged ship parts and materials from the forest to create weapons and barriers. "Help me move these metal plates into a defensive circle around our camp." For the first time since they had crashed, the aliens listened to her suggestions without argument. They worked together to create a basic fortification using pieces of their damaged ship. Rylan showed them how to arrange the barriers to provide overlapping fields of fire and multiple escape routes as darkness fell once again. They settled into wait. This time, all four of them stayed awake and alert. Pip's scanner was running continuously, and Vok had his energy weapon charged and ready. Zixthara kept watch on one side of their perimeter, while Rylan covered the other. The attack came just after midnight. Pip was the first to see it. He was scanning the forest with his night vision equipment when something massive moved between the trees about 50 meters from their camp. "There," he squeaked, pointing toward the movement. "Something big moving toward us from the north." They all turned to look, but whatever Pip had seen had already disappeared back into the shadows. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then Rylan heard a sound that made her blood run cold. It was Pip's voice, calling for help from somewhere deep in the forest. "Help me," the voice cried. "Something has me. Help." Vok immediately started to get up and run toward the sound, but Rylan grabbed one of his massive arms. "Wait," she said urgently. "Pip is right here." They all looked around and saw that Pip was indeed still in their camp, crouched behind one of their defensive barriers with his eyes wide with terror. "That was not me," he whispered. "Something else is making that sound." The fake distress calls continued, moving from one side of their camp to the other. Whatever was making them was a perfect mimic, reproducing not just Pip's voice, but his speech patterns and even the way he pronounced certain words. "It is trying to separate us," Rylan realized. "Make us leave the safety of our camp to investigate." How can it copy his voice so perfectly? Zixthara asked, her scales flashing between fear and confusion. I do not know, Rylan admitted. But whatever we are dealing with, it is a lot smarter than we thought. The fake cries for help continued through the night, moving in a circle around their camp. Sometimes it was Pip's voice, sometimes Vox's deep rumble, and once it even mimicked Zixthara's hissing accent perfectly. The creature was learning from them, studying their voices and speech patterns with each passing hour. This is impossible, Pip whispered, his blue fur standing straight up with fear. How can it know our voices so well? We have only been here for 2 days. Maybe it has been watching us longer than we thought, Rylan suggested. She kept her improvised spear ready and her eyes on the tree line. Maybe it was following us since we first crashed. But my scanner would have detected it, Pip insisted, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Your scanner detects heat and movement, Rylan pointed out. What if this creature is smart enough to mask its heat signature? What if it knows how to move in ways that avoid detection? Zixthara's scales had been shifting between yellow and red all night, showing her growing fear and anger. Animals cannot be that intelligent. Even the smartest creatures on most worlds are not capable of this kind of behavior. Maybe this creature is not like most animals, Rylan said quietly. The calls suddenly stopped. The forest became so quiet that they could hear their own breathing and the soft hum of their equipment. For almost an hour, nothing moved in the darkness around them. Then Vox screamed Dot it happened so fast that none of them had time to react. One moment the massive Gorvani was crouched behind their defensive barrier, watching the forest with his energy weapon ready. The next moment, something huge and dark had grabbed him and dragged him into the trees. Thok, Zixthara shouted, jumping to her feet and firing her energy weapon into the darkness where he had disappeared. The bright blue bolts lit up the forest for brief moments, but they revealed nothing except empty trees and shadows. We have to help him, Pip squeaked, starting to climb over their barrier. No, Rylan grabbed the small alien and pulled him back. That is exactly what it wants us to do. It wants us to leave our defensive position and go into the forest where it has the advantage. But Vok is out there, Zixthara hissed. We cannot just leave him. Listen, Rylan said urgently. They all held their breath and strained their ears. From somewhere deep in the forest, they could hear Vok's voice calling for help. But unlike the mimicked voices they had heard earlier, this sounded real. There was genuine pain and fear in his cries. It has him, Pip whispered. It really has him. Zixthara started toward the forest again, but Rylan blocked her path. If we go out there, we will just give it more victims. We need to stay together and stay in our defensive position. The human is right, Pip said reluctantly. My people have encountered pack hunters before. They use wounded members of the group to lure others into traps. Vok's cries continued for several more minutes before they finally stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the screaming had been. Dawn came slowly, and with it came the courage to venture beyond their barrier. They found signs of struggle about 20 meters from their camp. The ground was torn up, and there were drops of Gorvani blood on the fallen leaves. But there was no body, and the trail led deep into the forest. We have to find him, Zixthara said, and her scales were now a sickly pale color that showed how frightened she really was. The trail is clear, Pip observed, studying the disturbed ground with his scanner. Whatever took him wanted us to be able to follow. It is another trap, Rylan said with certainty. It wants us to split up and search for him. That way, it can pick us off one by one. So what do you suggest? Zixthara asked angrily. That we just abandon Vok and hide here like cowards? I suggest we work together to get the ship repaired as fast as possible, Rylan replied. Without Vok's help, It will take longer, but it is still possible. Once we can fly, we can get off this planet and send a rescue team back for him. If he is still alive by then, Pip said quietly. They spent the day working frantically on the ship repairs, but without Vox's strength and mechanical skills, progress was much slower. Every sound from the forest made them jump and look over their shoulders. Several times they heard what sounded like Vox calling for help, but they could never tell if it was really him or another mimicked voice dot. As afternoon faded toward evening, their situation became desperate. They had managed to get the basic life support systems working, but the hyperdrive was still completely inoperable. At their current pace, it would take at least 4 more days to make the ship space-worthy. "We do not have 4 days," Zixthara said grimly. "At this rate, that thing will pick us off one by one before we can escape." "Maybe we should try to fight it," Pip suggested. His voice was shaky, but there was determination in his large eyes. "We have weapons. We are intelligent beings. Surely we can defeat one animal, no matter how large it is." "This is not just any animal," Rylan warned. "Whatever we are dealing with, it is smart enough to plan attacks, coordinate with others of its kind, and use psychological warfare against us. It has been studying us since we arrived, learning our weaknesses, and waiting for the right moment to strike." "You talk about it like it is a person instead of a creature," Zixthara observed. "Maybe that is because it thinks like a person," Rylan replied. "On Earth, my species encountered other intelligent predators. The ones that survived were the ones that learned to respect their intelligence instead of underestimating it. As darkness fell again, they prepared for another long night of terror. This time, they arranged themselves so that each person could watch a different direction, making it harder for the creature to approach without being seen. The attack came just after. The larger moon reached its peak. This time, they saw it coming. The creature that emerged from the forest was unlike anything any of them had ever seen. It stood 12 feet tall at the shoulder and moved with the fluid grace of a giant cat, but its body was built more like a bear. Its fur was dark and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Most terrifying of all were its eyes, which glowed with an intelligence that was clearly more than animal. "By the void," Zixthara whispered. "What is that thing?" The creature stopped at the edge of their clearing and studied them for a long moment. It showed no fear of their weapons or their defensive position. Instead, it seemed to be evaluating them, deciding which one to take next. "It is beautiful," Pip said in a voice full of awe and terror. "And absolutely terrifying." The creature moved around their camp in a slow circle, staying just beyond the range of their energy weapons. Every few steps it would stop and make a sound that was almost like speech, but in no language any of them recognized. "It is trying to communicate with us," Rylan realized. "Do not be ridiculous," Zixthara snapped. "Animals cannot talk." "This one can mimic our voices perfectly," Rylan pointed out. "Maybe vocal communication is just one of its hunting strategies." The creature completed its circle and returned to its original position. Then it did something that made all 3 of them gasp in shock. It stood up on its hind legs, making it even taller and more imposing, and spoke in perfect galactic standard. "You do not belong here," it said in a voice that was deep and resonant but clearly intelligent. "This is our world. You will leave, or you will feed us." For several seconds, none of them could find their voices. Finally, Zixthara managed to stammer, "You ... You can talk?" "We have always been able to talk," the creature replied. "The question is whether you are intelligent enough to listen. What do you want?" Pip squeaked. "We want you to leave our hunting grounds," the creature said simply. "But first, you will tell us why you came here and what you have taken from our world." "We did not take anything," Zixthara protested. "We crashed here by accident. Our ship was damaged and we just need time to repair it. The creature's head tilted slightly, like it was considering her words. You lie. We can smell the fear on you. Creatures who tell the truth do not fear so much. Rylan stepped forward slightly, causing both of her companions to hiss warnings at her. We are criminals, she said honestly. We stole valuable crystals from a mining facility on another world. Our ship was damaged during our escape, and we crashed here while trying to get away. Rylan, Zixthara snarled. Why did you tell it that? Because it already knows, Rylan replied, not taking her eyes off the massive predator. It has been studying us since we arrived. It knows we are not explorers or traders. It can probably smell the stress chemicals we produce when we lie. The creature made a sound that might have been approval. The small one speaks truth. This is good. Perhaps there is hope for understanding between us. Understanding? Pip asked nervously. We are the apex predators of this world, the creature explained. Nothing hunts us. Nothing challenges us. But you are also apex predators from your own worlds. We can sense this in the way you move, the way you think, the way you plan. This makes you worthy of respect, but also dangerous to us. We do not want to be dangerous to you, Rylan said carefully. We just want to repair our ship and leave. Perhaps, the creature said. But first, you must prove that you understand the rules of this place. Your large companion tried to fight us when we took him. He showed no respect for our strength or our intelligence. So we taught him the consequences of disrespect. The massive creature continued to circle their camp, its glowing eyes never leaving the three survivors. Rylan could feel the intelligence behind those eyes studying her, measuring her responses, trying to understand what kind of predator she really was. What do you want us to do? She asked, keeping her voice calm and respectful. You will come with us, the creature replied. All of you. We will show you what happens to those who do not respect the natural order of this world. And if we refuse? Zixthara asked, though her scales had turned completely pale with fear. The creature made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was not a pleasant sound. You cannot refuse. You are in our territory now. You follow our rules or you become our food. Those are the only choices. Pip clutched his scanner to his chest like it might protect him. Please, we mean no harm. We just want to fix our ship and leave your world. Your intentions do not matter, the creature said. What matters is that you understand your place here. You are not the apex predators on this world. We are. Rylan slowly set down her improvised spear and stepped forward with her hands visible and empty. Both Zixthara and Pip hissed warnings at her, but she ignored them. You are right, she said. To the creature, this is your world, and we are the invaders. On Earth, my species learned to survive by understanding the rules of apex predators. We learned when to fight, when to flee, and when to show respect. The creature stopped moving and fixed its full attention on her. You speak differently than the others. There is less fear in your scent, but more awareness. Tell us about your world and how your species became apex predators. Rylan thought carefully about how to explain human evolution to an alien intelligence. My species started as prey animals, like you said. We were small and weak, with no natural weapons like claws or fangs. But we learned to hunt in groups, to use tools, and to understand the behavior of other predators. Continue, the creature commanded. We became persistence hunters, Rylan explained. We could not run faster than our prey, but we could run longer. We would chase large animals for days until they collapsed from exhaustion. But the most important thing we learned was how to work with other apex predators instead of always fighting them. The creature's head tilted with interest. You allied with other predators? Yes, we domesticated wolves and turned them into partners for hunting. We learned to read the behavior of large cats and bears so we could avoid them or drive them away when necessary. We understood that survival sometimes meant cooperation instead of domination. Interesting, the creature said. Your large companion showed no such understanding. When we tested his worthiness, he tried to use brute force against superior numbers and intelligence. He failed the test. What happened to him? Zixthara asked quietly. Come and see, the creature replied. But remember, you are guests in our territory now. Any aggressive action will be met with immediate death. They had no choice but to follow. The creature led them into the forest, along a path that seemed to have been worn smooth by many large feet over many years. Other shadows moved between the trees alongside them, and Rylan realized they were being escorted by an entire pack of the intelligent predators. How many of you are there? She asked. Enough, the creature replied. We are the Shadow Mole. We have ruled this forest for longer than your species has existed. Every creature here knows and respects our authority. They walked for almost an hour before arriving at a clearing that was clearly the pack's home territory. Ancient trees formed a natural amphitheater around a central area where the ground was worn smooth by countless feet. In the center of the clearing, Vox sat tied to a massive tree trunk with vines and rope. He was alive, but barely conscious. His gray hide was marked with scratches and bite marks, and one of his forearms hung at an odd angle that suggested it was broken. When he saw them approaching, he tried to stand, but could only manage to lift his head. Vox, Pip cried out, starting to run toward his injured crewmate. Stop, the lead Shadowmaw commanded, and Pip froze in place. Your companion lives because we chose to let him live. Whether he continues to live depends on what happens next. More Shadowmaw emerged from the forest around them. Rylan counted at least a dozen of the massive predators, all of them watching the newcomers with intelligent eyes. Some were slightly smaller than their leader, but all of them moved with the same fluid grace and obvious intelligence. You said we had to prove we understand the rules, Rylan said. What kind of proof do you want? A test of worthiness, the lead Shadowmaw replied. Each of you will face a challenge. Those who show proper respect for our authority will be allowed to repair their ship and leave. Those who fail will join your companion as our guests until they learn proper behavior. What kind of challenge? Zixthara asked nervously. You will each fight one of us in single combat, the creature explained. But this is not a fight to the death. It is a test of understanding. You must show that you know when to fight and when to submit. Pip's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. I cannot fight one of you. I am too small. You will kill me. Size does not determine worthiness, the Shadowmaw said. Intelligence and respect do. Your large companion was bigger and stronger than you, but he failed because he could not understand. When he was beaten, Zixthara was the first to be tested. A smaller Shadowmaw, though still much larger than any of the aliens, approached her slowly. The reptilian criminal raised her energy weapon, but the lead Shadowmaw hissed a warning. No artificial weapons, he said. This test is about natural ability and understanding, not technology. Zixthara reluctantly set down her weapon and faced her opponent. The Shadowmaw circled her slowly, studying her movements and reactions. When it finally attacked, it was not with killing intent, but with careful, controlled aggression. The fight lasted only a few minutes. Zixthara tried to use her natural speed and agility to avoid the Shadowmaw's attacks, but it was clear that she was outmatched. When the predator finally pinned her to the ground with one massive paw, she had the wisdom to stop struggling and submit. Acceptable, the lead Shadowmaw declared. You understand when you are beaten and show proper respect. For superior strength. Pip's test was next, and as expected, it was over almost immediately. The small Zilfian took one look at his opponent and immediately curled up in a ball, showing complete submission. The Shadow Mole sniffed at him briefly and then stepped back. Also, acceptable, the leader said. Sometimes wisdom means knowing when not to fight at all. Then it was Ryland's turn. The largest Shadow Mole, except for the leader, approached her, its eyes glowing with challenge and curiosity. Ryland stood her ground, but kept her posture relaxed and non-threatening. You are different from the others, the creature said as it began to circle her. There is predator scent on you, but also something else. Show us what kind of hunter you really are. The Shadow Mole attacked suddenly, but Ryland was ready. Instead of trying to fight or flee, she did something that surprised everyone present. She began to mirror the creature's movements, copying its posture and stance. When it showed aggression, she showed submission. When it backed off slightly, she maintained respectful distance. After several minutes of this careful dance, the Shadow Mole stopped and sat back on its haunches. It made a sound. That was clearly approval. You understand, it said. You know how to communicate with other apex predators. You show respect without showing fear. You demonstrate that your species has wisdom as well as strength. The lead Shadow Mole approached Ryland directly. Tell us, human, what do you think? Should happen now? Ryland looked around at the pack of intelligent predators, at her frightened companions, and at the injured Vok tied to the tree. She thought about everything she had learned during her years of military service on different worlds. I think, she said carefully, that we should make an agreement. You are the rulers of this world, and we respect that. We will repair our ship and leave your territory as quickly as possible. In return, we will place a warning beacon in orbit around your planet to keep other ships from landing here without permission. And what of the crystals you stole? The Shadow Mole asked. Ryland was surprised by the question. You know about those? We know many things. Our territory includes the old mining facility that was abandoned decades ago. We saw you steal from the Sky People who came to take things from our world. The crystals are yours by right, Ryland said without hesitation. Your world, your resources. We will return them to you. The lead Shadow Mole studied her for a long moment, then made a decision. Acceptable. You have shown proper respect and understanding. Your injured companion will be healed and returned to you. You will have 3 days to repair your ship and leave our territory. What about other criminals who might come here? Zixthara asked. Any who show proper respect will be allowed to leave, the Shadow Mole replied. Any who show disrespect will be taught the same lesson your large companion learned. Word will spread among your kind that this world is protected. As they were led back to their ship, Pip whispered to Ryland, How did you know what to do? Because I recognize them for what they really are, Ryland replied. They are not just predators. They are people. Different from us, but people nonetheless. And people can be reasoned with if you show them the proper respect.